another episode of Square of Self-Love. And I'm so excited to get this topic out. I wanted y'all to enjoy your Valentine's Day. Didn't want to, break out some self-reflective moments that might ruin your Valentine's. So, I appreciate a good holiday. And out of respect for that, wanted to save the dating and love sessions for after Valentine's. So here we are. The dust is settled. The roses are now deep in water and on their way out of this world, probably. So let's get real and let's get into it. Alrighty, so I am full transparency. I'm doing my makeup right now. So I'm going to do my best to edit out any areas that are super noisy or anything like that. But I'm trying to see honestly how good this microphone works, and I somehow always happen to be too close or too far away from my microphone. So I'm really trying to figure this out. But also, if you don't already follow me on social media, please follow me at square_of_self_love on Instagram. There you will also find a link tree in my bio that goes to all of my other social media platforms and other platforms for listening, such as Spotify podcasts. Obviously I upload to Spotify podcasts, so an Apple podcast. Alrighty, so let's get started with our affirmations. The first affirmation is, I am deserving of love and respect just as I am. I am deserving of love and respect just as I am. I am deserving of love and respect just as I am. Okay. I attract healthy and fulfilling relationships into my life. I attract healthy and fulfilling relationships into my life. I attract healthy and fulfilling relationships into my life. I prioritize my own happiness and well-being in dating. I prioritize my own happiness and well-being in dating. I prioritize my own happiness and well-being in dating. I embrace my authentic self and communicate my needs openly. I embrace my authentic self and communicate my needs openly. I embrace my authentic self and communicate my needs openly. Alrighty. Okay, so I feel like that was probably the best run that I've had for affirmations. But of course, welcome back to the episode, guys. Let's get into it. I'm so excited about this. Like I said, I feel like when I was in my self-love journey, I was validated by the ways that it impacted my dating experiences. I feel like I was very insecure about kind of just like the ways that I started looking at myself. I felt like it was more lofty to expect someone to view me as I had learned to view myself and how I was working on viewing myself. But I think just having that sense of confidence and having that feeling of being okay being alone, like I was completely comfortable being single. I was perfectly comfortable being alone. I actually took several months where I just stopped dating altogether, deleted the apps and really like focused on myself. And I think that all came from my mom. Actually, she talks very often about how she was comfortable, and I actually really want to have her on here one day, so we're definitely going to do that. But she talks very openly about how she took several years after dating my dad to really be alone, really find herself, and just focused on her children and her self-love journey. And that has always really spoke to me. I feel like that was one of the things that I never really hear other like women promoting. And I talk about women doing this, but even men, like I don't hear often that people intentionally stop dating altogether. I feel like often we take ourselves out of the dating game, but still have that hope that someone will find us, especially for my girlies who like stay in the house all the time, hoping that someone will like bust through your door. Love that for you. Like I love we used to joke about that with my friends because I did have a friend who was like that. Like, you're just going to sit at home and wait for the man to like bust through the window, which, you know, maybe, but I definitely like, I can subscribe to that. Like, I stopped dating, but I was also hoping that I would run into like Prince Charming in, you know, the library or whatever the case may be. And I had to like completely free myself of that. It wasn't realistic. It wasn't, you know, productive. I was almost just like lying to myself, like, oh no, I don't want a boyfriend. But if I did happen to have like someone come up to me and should the situation work out right, and just like all these hypotheticals. And it's like, I had to really be honest with myself. Like, okay, if I say I am not open to dating, like I am also declining dates. I am also actively being honest about, okay, like, sorry, right now I'm really just invested in myself. I'm not interested. And you know, not being disrespectful when I might decline dates, but being honest about that, not wasting their time or my time. And so that was really important for me. And I also took time to not engage sexually, which also was very impactful for my self-love journey, because I do like plan on doing an episode when it comes to like self-love and sex. But I definitely feel like in some ways I was validating how I felt about myself because I was able to, you know, engage in sexual activity with a handsome gentleman that I was interested in. I was even like the fact that I was getting dates with a handsome guy that I was interested in, it almost validated like my sense of self, which isn't really healthy because you are essentially putting your sense of self in someone else's hands, which is like a very dangerous situation to be in, right? Like the second they're no longer interested in you, that now reflects on how you feel about yourself. And that's like the worst case scenario. So I definitely had to just take myself through like kind of just like a boot camp where I was like, okay, like I feel this way about myself. Like, why is that? How can I seek the validation that I need, that I usually get in dating and you know, relationships, whatever the case may be? How can I find that validation elsewhere in a healthy place and provide that for myself? That's really what it was. Like, not find it elsewhere, like clothes or money or whatever the case may be. But how can I, you know, solidify myself in this? So this is probably going to be my favorite episode, and I seriously can't wait for you guys to hear it. Okay, so let's get into our first main topic, and that is how self-love impacts dating, number one. And when you have a healthy sense of self-love, the best thing it probably does for you is impacts your confidence. So confidence that is rooted in self-love, guys, when I tell you, it is magnetic. Like, it's just naturally something that draws people in, and you draw in partners who appreciate and value you for who you are, because that is essentially the baseline. Like, when you are really working on your self-love, you have a strong self-love journey, and then you are just walking in that. Like, you're not seeking someone, you're not dating from a space of I need a partner, you're not dating from a space of, because when you think about like when people date out of, I call it desperation. Like when you date out of desperation, then you're putting out this energy of lack, and you're dating as if there is a hole within you. There's a part of you that is not full. And the other suitors, your other, prospectors will recognize that, and they will see that you have this lack, and it will attract manipulative people. It will attract people who want to feel important in the relationship and not want to feel like they are a partner in a relationship. And so you're really kind of attracting negativity when you're dating from a space of lack or desperation. And so, I call it a space of desperation. I have dated like this before. Like, you are not the only one. This is simply how I view it. Like, I definitely feel like when you date from a point of, lack of self-love, and you're needing a relationship or someone to validate you, it's like you attract the worst kinds of partner. And so when you're dating from a space of confidence and self-love, you almost set the tone for, this is how I treat myself, and this is how you will have to treat me as well. And that confidence gives you so much like liberation in your relationship. You have the sense of, if I am not receiving the love that I know I deserve, I am okay with walking away from this, because I know I can be with myself and be completely fine. And so it really does shape the way that you carry yourself. You exude assurance and attract those who resonate with your self-assured energy. And they're very much so, hopefully, that partner is also assured within themselves, but you definitely have the space where they are coming in, recognizing that you are whole, and you are dating from a space of comfort. And even thinking about it, like, no one, like, when you're dating from a space of need, you date more like you're hungry, right? Like, it's almost like you're, you need food, you have to get food. You think about like how we make decisions when we're starving, like we would eat literally anything. That's probably how like fast food restaurants get most of their service, because people are in a hurry, they're hungry, like they don't have time to really consider quality of food, or even like if people have like low resources. So it's really just like you're at that spot where you'll take anything. And that's something to really recognize. Like, you don't want to spend your dating like that, like, because there's consequences. And the consequence is, just the type of person you attract, and being less than pleased with the type of relationship you nurture from that. And so just having that sense of confidence is really, really, really huge for your relationships. I cannot stress this enough. And so we're going to go into like our reflective questions, and then I'll tell you guys a little bit about how this is like personal to me. But so the first reflective question is, how does valuing yourself impact your confidence in dating? And this might seem like very elementary, but like this is a great way to kind of just start that foundation. The sense that, how might this impact my specific dating and relationships? And that's like really helpful maybe to just like get it down on paper. Because, think about your previous relationships. Have you had the same kind of patterns? Are you getting that sense of like, my partners are always, this way, super argumentative. They're always defensive. They're always, and how long have you stayed in those relationships? I think one of the biggest things for me when it comes to, and we're going to do a specific relationship episode. This is like the dating episode, but like, I know myself personally, I've stayed in dating like situationships way longer than I probably should have, for the sake of, well, this person looks good on paper. Well, this would be a great person if they had this, if they would just work on this. But when you have that confidence to just walk away from the situation, it's like really integral. You stop wasting time with the wrong people and make space for the right people. And I've seen things on like social media that's like, don't let someone convince you that like your self-love is so important that you end up like 50 and single and alone. And I'm like, what? I'm sorry, me personally, I am not offended by being alone. Like, I feel like I was brought into this world by myself. I will leave this world by myself. And if I am not with someone in a relationship or intimate like capacity, I guess I'll just have to, I don't know, explore the world and do everything I enjoy about myself. Like, that doesn't sound like a bad deal at all. And like, just because you aren't in an intimate relationship doesn't mean you don't have friends, doesn't mean you don't love people and don't have people that love you. And so I think like it definitely speaks to the sense of like, and also like, I date from a space of abundance. Like, I do not believe that just because I say no to one person, no one else in the future will ever encounter me and try to date me. Like, that's unrealistic. There's so many people on this planet. And there's so many people on this planet looking for love. Like, we love to talk about how few people there are and how few options there are. But you really only need one person when you are ready in the right way. Like, and that is very doable. It's very possible. There are so many people, and people are constantly changing and evolving and growing. And you will meet people in a phase of your life that are very good for you. And then you'll move on to another phase, and you'll be incongruent for whatever reason. It doesn't mean that you guys, aren't good people or, still enjoy each other's company, but like aren't productive in a relationship capacity. And when you hold on to the wrong person for the wrong reasons, you're not nurturing the right energy at all. But this is going to be really hard for me to not like ramble. First, think about how does valuing yourself impact your confidence in dating. And so that's going to be number one. I already love that. So reflective question number two is going to be, in what ways does self-love influence the way you present yourself to potential partners? And so I think that's big. I feel like right now, and when I talk about like women and dating, I'm not specifically like saying this podcast is just for women. I feel like this message goes for literally anyone who is dating in the dating realm. But as a woman, I speak from, a first person experience. And so that's really all that comes from. But I do not want men to think that like, oh, she's only talking about for women, because if anything, honestly, I thought about making a podcast just for men, because I truly feel like men need to, especially like when it comes to men who are wanting healthy partners. I feel like so many men date from this space of assuming the most toxic traits out of women. And that definitely speaks to the type of women they've attracted. And that also, like, I truly feel like the type of people you are attracting are a reflection of how you're dating. And if you feel like, I don't like this trait, you need to change something within yourself that will attract different, and not verbally. Do not say like, I feel like so many times people say, oh, you probably do this. Like, the best way to shoot yourself in the foot when it comes to a good partner is assuming the worst of them. And so I definitely feel like I would love for men to listen to this podcast, because I feel like many men need to love themselves. And if they love themselves, then they would date differently, and we would have much healthy and productive relationships altogether. But that's, for another episode. But I truly feel like reflecting on the ways that self-love could influence the way that you present yourself to a potential partner is huge. I feel like I'm always very, self-aware of just like how I look physically, and oh my goodness, I hate this part of myself, and I don't want anyone else to recognize this. I feel like society shapes us to have a lot of physical insecurities at large. And so when I started loving myself and appreciating myself, I feel like I would show up to dates way less insecure, and I would be I felt less of a drive to show off the things I was proud of on my body, or even less braggadocious. Right now, a lot of men that I see on like YouTube are saying, don't talk about your accolades as a part of your personality. And I always thought that was funny. I was like, well, why would I bring up my accolades as if it was like a job interview? But I guess some people have made that their personality, like their accomplishments or whatever the case may be. But when you have a healthy sense of self-love and you know yourself and your characteristics, that's a huge thing. You feel it less necessary to brag about your accomplishments, and you feel more of a sense of, what are you proud of about yourself personally? What character traits are you most excited about for yourself? And that's definitely something to think about, and just you might show up feeling less of a need to sell yourself on a date. Um, when I go on dates, I take it as a conversation, right? And I definitely put less pressure on dates after like I was assured of myself and my self-love journey. If I went on a date with someone and we didn't work out, we just didn't work out. Like, I didn't feel the pressure for them to text me after. I didn't feel the pressure to text them after. And like, if they did text me after, that was awesome. And like, that's what I feel like organic relationships happen to pace. Well, I always follow the pace of the man, which I would highly, 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 highly recommend. I believe that the man drives a relationship, okay? I am going to be a passenger princess when it comes to the pace of the relationship. And so when I'm dating, I follow the flow that the gentleman says. And if, they don't text me back, they don't text me back. I don't take it personal. I simply, just accept that for what it is. And I feel like that's the biggest thing. Like, I am not basing how they feel about me in a personal way on how they react in the relationship or in the dating, early dating phase. How they, if they text me back, if they want to go on a second date, if they want to see me again, does that mean I'm not good enough? Does that mean I'm not, is that a sense of harsh, we're going to talk about rejection, but like, does that reflect poorly on me? Which, no, this is just like, you definitely take the bulk of the insecurities out of dating when you have a healthy sense of self-love. And so that was a long tangent, but I cannot emphasize this enough. Like, it definitely changes the way you show up and present yourself to potential partners, because you aren't dating for the sake of validating this part of yourself, because that part is already validated. You are simply showing up on a date to see if your personalities meld, if you guys, are a good fit for one another. And if you aren't, that's okay. Like, there's so many different personality types. There's a good chance that your personalities might not meld. But even if they do, your values might not meld. And that's okay. You guys might have a conversation about, it's first date, so a little early to be talking about like kids. But in the event that it comes up and this partner is like, yeah, I don't want kids, and you've learned something, and that's okay. But knowing that about yourself and being sure about that with yourself gives you the space to be like, okay, fine, I understand. It was still very nice meeting you. Like, you don't have to end the date, on a Discord. You can still enjoy the evening. You can have great conversation, but knowing that, okay, like, we can be friends, we can be in each other's life, but setting a sense of, okay, your expectations. Sorry, that was a long one. Okay. And then the final question for this is, how do you differentiate between confidence rooted in self-love versus arrogance? And this is huge. I feel like this is very relevant to how I mentioned, you can come off as very braggadocious. I don't think I was ever I never necessarily bragged about being a medical student or being a doctor. I'm very passionate about medicine. I love the human body. I love working with, in the medical realm. I love being in the hospital. So I usually talk about it from a sense of like, I'm very passionate about it, like a sense of passion. But I don't know. I feel like I've been in school long enough. And it's such a daunting and exhausting path that I don't necessarily feel like I can brag about it. Like, I also don't feel like I was a super genius. Like, there's a, stigma or an ego. People expect you to be super smart. But like, I studied all the time in medical school. It was so much work. It was so exciting. Like, I don't know. To me, it's not a flex so much as it is like a staple to my work ethic. Like, that's probably the only way I feel like I can really brag is like, yeah, I go hard for what I want. But when it comes to like, oh yeah, I'm going to be wealthy, like, I'm not wealthy now. I'm a medical student. So that doesn't make sense. And there are plenty of doctors who don't have like as much money as you think they do, or they're like, they don't spend their money wisely. So I just feel like I was never in a space to brag about my profession or my potential earnings. Like, it never felt like it applied to me. And then I'm not doing this for money. So it's definitely just one of those things. But also, like, when you have like that fake confidence, it does come off as arrogance. And when it's not rooted in a space of self-love and that you know yourself, it definitely comes off as arrogance. You come off as, you're not willing to interact with just anyone. Versus when you have that sense of self-love, you recognize that other people need that too. You recognize that, okay, maybe I could just be warm to everyone. Like, it's almost like that's one of the best things that's happened to me. I kind of enter all of my social interactions from a space of warmth and willing. And when you have that, you almost, it's funny, I've been told like it's refreshing. And that is like such a great compliment to me. Someone said like, your personality is just refreshing. And I felt so good. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. Like, because that's great. That's just like, it's a piece, and people need that. Like, the world is hard enough. Like, girl, like, groceries are up. Okay. Like, it's just, the world is hard enough. Like, when you have that sense of healthy confidence, healthy peace, you know what you allow in your life, you know what, doesn't necessarily belong to you. You can accept and deny from a space of peace. And that is important too, because sometimes you'll go on dates and you'll be like in your head, this is the last time I'm going to interact with this person. And I know that for certain. However, you don't have to completely shut down. You don't have to make the date awkward. You don't have to make this person, dating men for me specifically, like, you don't have to make this man feel small or insignificant, or like he was dumb for asking you on a date, or the place that he chose wasn't good enough. I've gone on dates that I was like, I would never take somebody here on a first date, but we move. Like, I take it as, okay, now I know, like, if I let the person pick the date, I have to be open to wherever they pick. And maybe I do go on the date, we have fun, whatever, but I'm more so going to take it from a space of, I probably won't engage with this person again. And that's a part of dating. Dating is, you have to date with risk. People, well, okay, safe risk, right? Like, let's not get dangerous. But people often feel like when they're dating, it should be a certain way and cookie cutter and this, that, and the third, and everything is laid out in front of you. And I feel like when you're dating, you are inviting a stranger into your world in a very personal way. You're giving them your time, your energy, sometimes your resources if you take them to a special place of yours. And so you have to be willing to risk, like, okay, yes, I went on this date and this guy looks nothing like his pictures. He literally is so awkward, does not talk. It was such an uncomfortable experience. But take that as a learning opportunity. Like, you really have to have a sense of, okay, how can I flip this into a beneficial way? And so that was a very, very, very long first point. And if this is too long, because I am definitely going to cap it at an hour. But if it's too long of an episode, we'll just have to do a part 1 and a part 2. Okay, so let's get to point number 2. My value is not determined based on how they treat me in the dating phase or how they treat me at all. And that's the thing about when you have self-love and you're dating from a space of self-love, is that your value isn't dictated by how someone treats you. Your internal, value is set by you and only you, and nobody or their treatment or their things or whatever can change that. But it takes a level of really trusting yourself and trusting that to know that. So, okay, so let's get to point number 2 on how self-love impacts your dating. And I feel like the biggest thing for me and the most integral part was the way that it gave me the strength to set and uphold my boundaries. And I feel like setting boundaries naturally raises your value. Like, I cannot stress this enough when, of course, if you're listening to the podcast in order, then you've heard the first episode, really, which is, setting boundaries. But I just can't emphasize this enough. I think about, I always talk about value in terms of like brands and value of money and things like that. And that's just because it makes sense to me. And it's a lot more like practical. But when you think about like designer brands, they have like a price tag on their items, and it's high, and they are very honest about the price tag, and there is nothing you can do to negotiate that down. You cannot like convince, I don't know, Mercedes-Benz to give you a car at like 50%. Like, you can't convince Lamborghini to give you a car for the same price that you would get, I don't know, a Nissan or something like that. Like, y'all, I'm not car people, clearly, but like when you have designer anything, You can't negotiate that down. And that is their boundary. That's simply what it is. And so when you have your boundaries, because I've named all these things, right? But you are way more valuable than any of these things. And you have to really trust that. And so when you have your boundaries and you enforce them and you love yourself enough to support yourself in those boundaries and justify to yourself, because you don't have to justify it to anyone else, but when you can justify it to yourself, this is my boundary, this is why I have this boundary, and they may not understand it, and that's okay. That raises your value. Now, understanding that, well, maybe I'll save that for the last part of this, but all I'm going to say is setting boundaries. When you have a space of self-love and you feel comfortable setting your boundaries, your dating is so different. I thought that setting boundaries and upholding my boundaries would make dating harder. But when I tell you, people respect, and not even dating, like even in personal friendship relationships, like people respect people who have boundaries, because if this is how you treat yourself, this is also how you will treat the relationship. This is how you will support me. This is how you will respect me, you know? And it's really important to recognize that you having boundaries for yourself is going to change the quality of people you get in your life. It's not going to change. It's definitely going to change the quantity, because fewer people will be available to meet that boundary if it's, higher than what you've been previously accepting, which is, little to nothing. If you change your boundary and, dare I say, raise it, well, let's talk about standard is really what's going on. If you set your boundaries, it raises your standard. That's what I'm saying too. It's like it raises your value, it raises your standard. And by raising your standard, you do disqualify a lot more people from being in your life in whatever capacity, right? Friends, intimate relationships, even job standards. And so when you raise that standard, you have to acknowledge that, yes, this may mean I'm disqualifying more people, but I'm getting a much better quality of people, if that makes sense. And I'll go back to like the Lamborghini, Mercedes-Benz example. There's not a line of people trying to get into these stores. It's not a huge, everyday flash sale at the Lamborghini lot. Girl, Jesus, I'm just embarrassing myself. But you know what I mean? Like, there's not a huge amount of people trying to get these cars because not everybody can afford them. But the ones that can, they walk in and they drive out. You see what I mean? They probably drive in, or maybe they got driven there. I don't know. But what I'm saying is, like, the people who can afford these things, they get it. And they know they can afford it. They're not going to negotiate and, oh, well, you need to do this. Well, how dare you? They're not guilting them into, what if I, did this and how can I compromise here? No, this is what it is. Take it or leave it. Point blank period. Like what else is there? And so when I say you raise your value, you raise your standard, when you set and uphold your boundaries, but let me get into the real details of this point. Self-love empowers you, right? To establish and uphold those boundaries that safeguard your emotional well-being and honor your values. So there's a lot of things that will guilt, and I'm going to speak very specifically about the experiences I've had as a woman. There are a lot of things that guilt us into lowering our standard. There's a lot of things between social media, society, men or partners who are unable to meet those standards. They will make you feel bad about it. They will make you feel like you are being stuck up and needy, and you're asking for too much. This is an unrealistic. And even women, I've had friends that feel like my standard is too high, and what I'm expecting from a relationship and love is just unrealistic. But you want to know the one thing that's kept me very firm on my boundaries and my standards? And I can't emphasize this enough. I get it. Like, I completely have people, and even I've had partners who were my standard and then some. I've experienced my standard so often and so clearly, so boldly, so that's all you want, that's all you're asking. let me do that and more. I've experienced that. And when I tell you, that is so much better than any guilt, any shame, any judgment about me having a high standard, that has validated the most. I am so fortunate to have had experiences, and I'm not even talking about just dating at this point. I'm talking about in my life, because think about it, like delayed gratification, right? Like, I have gone to school way longer than many of my friends who aren't in the medical school route. And I have to trust that what I'm asking for of myself is a lot, and it's time consuming, and it is, going to strain me in a lot of ways that are new to me, but I have to trust that it's worth it. And so when you set a boundary and you set an expectation for yourself, you have to really trust that it is worth it, okay? And you have to trust that when you set these boundaries and uphold them for other people, the people who care about you, and it might not even be a problem. It won't be the problem for the right people. They will see that as, you have this standard for yourself, and I know that you have a better standard for those who you love and care about. And so you have to trust that the right people will receive your boundaries and see your standard and raise your standard even. But you can't expect for the wrong people to support a boundary they can't reach. You can't expect the wrong people to encourage you to enforce a boundary that eliminates them. Okay? You can't expect that, because it's not going to happen. Why would they cheer for something they don't qualify for? And they know they don't qualify for it. And so you having this boundary means I might be on the chopping block, and you really have to think about that. And when you date and set your boundaries, I'm on my tangent again. Sorry, guys. But when you date and you set your boundaries, you allow yourself to navigate dating dynamics with clarity and assertiveness while fostering healthier relationships built on mutual respect. And who doesn't want that, right? Who doesn't want that? If somebody disrespects you and it's blatant, you would walk right away from it. But if it's a little more covert and you can guess and question around it, and maybe it's not what it is, and maybe it's, maybe they just didn't, we explain away so much. But what if you just looked at the situation for what it is? You have a boundary, you respect that boundary, and this person crosses the line one too many times, or maybe once, and that was enough for you. But regardless of the number, they cross a boundary and you uphold that. Now you've eliminated somebody, and that's just that, right? That's what dating is for. You have to stop dating like you're looking for your husband right away, right today. You're not doing that. You're dating to get to know somebody. That's it. That's really it. And sometimes you get to know people and you get to know that you guys don't match together, and that's okay. But you have to call a spade and walk away from it at that moment. You have to realize, me walking away from this person now doesn't mean that we will never, ever, ever be ever anything. But you at least reserve your mental space, your mental well-being, your wellness, your dating capacity to say, okay, this isn't the one. Let me walk, or this isn't someone I can match with. Or mesh with. Let me walk away from it. And that's fine. A lot of people have dating fatigue because they've been spending so much time trying to make the wrong person work. It's just not going to work. And you have to be willing to accept that and walk away from that, knowing that, okay, if this person doesn't work out, that doesn't mean it's the end of the road for me. So, okay, I promise y'all, we're going to get through this episode. Self-reflection questions for setting boundaries. The first one is going to be, how does self-love empower you to set and maintain healthy boundaries in dating? And so I definitely talked about that. You just feel so much more comfortable acknowledging your boundaries for what they are, not making them personal, not making them a personal reflection on some people, just simply saying what they are and not being guilted out of changing your boundaries, right? Question number 2, and I'm really excited about this one. What are some challenges you've faced in establishing boundaries? And how has self-love helped you overcome them? And so definitely for me in particular, I had experiences in my dating where it was just almost like I felt guilty for
standing up for myself. I felt guilty for, communicating this is something that I'm uncomfortable with. And I feel disrespected as a result. And I've had, partners that I thought would be much more receptive to, well, I'm not even gonna say partners, and I've had people in my life who I expected to react with a more supportive way. And I was definitely met with, defensiveness and just guilt. And it made it so much more clear to me who wasn't supposed to be in my life. It was just like, this isn't going to work. And it is one of those things that once you are so comfortable with your boundaries and you trust your boundaries to do what they should, which is eliminate the wrong people, it does that within a blink of an eye. You don't have to have a conversation half the time. You don't even need to really say much. I don't believe in ghosting. I would not, do that. But you definitely can walk away from the situation knowing that, okay, you know what? This is what it is. Be blessed, like it's out of my control. I can't do anything. But it's definitely one of those things that just makes it so much easier. It just makes it so clear. But the challenge is, really getting in that comfort and being okay with walking away from the wrong people, even if you've been trying to make those people the right people, right? Like, even if you thought, oh, yeah, like this will work. And we've all done it, right? Like, oh, if we could just change this, if I could just change this, if we could just, but the longer you do that and lie to yourself, and that is a challenge, being able to grapple with yourself. And, it's going to hurt and it's going to be something that you really have to work on. But once you take ownership of that, it definitely gets better. And then I want you to think about an example of a boundary you set in a dating context that was a result of self-love. And I know in particular me, I decided that I wouldn't have, casual intimacy with, people I was dating. I wanted to reserve that for a serious relationship. And I cannot stress how integral that was just for me. I definitely feel like my dating quality was much more efficient. I essentially stopped going on dates that I didn't enjoy. I also set a boundary that if I didn't feel like dating, I simply wouldn't. And I think a lot of times we feel like we need to be dating. But I definitely felt like I wasn't really genuinely dating, right? Like I was just going on dates because I felt like I should, and, sitting at conversations and dinners that I was just like, oh, well, I have free time and I'm single. So, but, being intentional about my dating experience and being intentional about the time that I date. And if it feels like a time where I just need to kind of hang out and be on my own, then I can do that. But I think that's really important. And then one of the biggest questions that I like to ask myself is, would I date me? And really being honest with myself about that. Am I in the space to have a fruitful and promising relationship? Am I willing to walk away from a dating experience if it doesn't serve me? Because I definitely feel like if you well, this is going to be in the relationship episode, but if you aren't able to end a relationship, like if you aren't in a mental space where you feel like you could break up with someone, then you don't need to be in a relationship. Because that is not what relationships are for. Relationships are for seeing if it's like the tryout for a marriage, right? And if you are going to just let anybody who tries out make the team, well, then what are you doing? You gotta be willing to, make some cuts. So I definitely feel like that is something that I had to ask myself, would I date me? Am I in a space to walk away from someone who is wrong for me? And if I'm not in a space to walk away from someone who's wrong for me, then I'm not in a space to accept anything. I need to really take time to unpack why that is and what insecurities am I hiding behind. But okay. And then I feel like, okay, so point number 3 is going to be the ways self-love impacts your dating is you choose healthy and fruitful relationships. And so realize that, as I said, dating is the tryout for a relationship. Well, I haven't said this, but so the way I see it, dating is the tryout for a relationship, and a relationship is the tryout for a marriage. And it's definitely important for you to have insight and discernment when it comes to dating in general. But I feel like through self-love, you develop a keen discernment for recognizing relationships that align with your growth and happiness. And it guides you in selecting partners who uplift and support your journey, fostering deeper connections founded on authenticity and mutual nourishment. Okay. So it's definitely going to be something that you are not just looking for a warm body, you're not just looking for somebody to go to wedding receptions with. You're not just looking for a date to bring to the holidays. You are looking for someone who aligns with your goals and your vision and what you want for yourself. And that is going to be very specific. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take time. You will have to tell people no, but the second you are willing to tell people no is the closer you get to the person that you're going to say yes to. I will say, I feel like men who know their vision do this amazingly. They do a really good job of this. They recognize, okay, this woman is, for temporary purposes, whatever the case may be. This woman, on the other hand, I have to handle her differently. I can't treat her the way I treat the other ones. I got to really come correct, right? And that is a huge thing. I feel like when you know where you're going, you know the right people who need to be along with you on that ride. And I will say this, like I just haven't met many women who feel that way as well. I definitely feel like I have had to, in my single season, unpack what my vision is, understand where I want to go with my life, and understand the values that I need in a man who also feels the same way about that, so that we can build on something together that is fruitful. Okay. I am looking for fruit. Hello. And if you want to know somebody's fruit, just watch what they've done, ask them their vision. And you really have to be sure about your own vision. And you have to know that what I am doing is dating for someone who's going to support me in the way that I need to be supported to be my best self, and vice versa. Who can I support to be their best self? Who can I encourage and uplift and see their vision and support them throughout their journey? And so that's what you're really doing. And that's a big ask. That's huge. But having that insight to choose and decline the right relationships is so fruitful. It's honestly, it's the reason to get married. It's really just one of those things where it's like, when you have the right person, it feels right. It almost feels natural. You look up and it's like, I didn't even realize we were in a relationship the way we were. Like it just kind of happened, evolved. And all of a sudden it's been, 6 months, 7 months. And why would I want to date anyone else? And, I've fortunately have had that in my life. Unfortunately, I've experienced that where it's almost like I'm not in the space to need a relationship, but as soon as I felt like I was in the right relationship, it just kind of melted away everything else. And that's how I know this is the way I want to date from here on out. Even if this isn't the man that I marry, this is exactly the way I plan to date, because it just feels natural and it feels gratifying and fruitful, and like it works. Even if it doesn't, result in marriage, it works, and I'm happy, and I feel productive, And so having that insight to choose, and I can't emphasize this enough, healthy and fruitful relationships. Don't just get in a relationship because somebody asked, okay? Stop doing that. Stop it. Stop acting like you aren't a catch. Let's call a spade a spade. Stop acting like you aren't literally special, like you aren't gifted with the talents and the qualities that you've had, and the self journey that you've gone through. And you're doing the work just by listening to this podcast, and you are valuable. Stop putting yourself on sale to the highest bidder, whoever shows up at the right time. No, that's not what it is. It might take time. It should take time. It shouldn't just be relationship back to back to back to back to back. You need to breathe, okay? You need to breathe. And I say this because I needed to breathe. No, I'm not going to say that I was in relationships back to back to back. I literally cannot do that. That to me is exhausting, right? Like, I'm way more comfortable in the getting to know people and like taking the time and pacing myself versus hopping in a relationship versus hopping out of a relationship. It's just a lot of like, I invest a lot when I'm in a relationship, as you should, emotionally and mentally. And I paint a picture of hope with people I'm in relationships with. And so it's exhausting to me to like end a relationship. I hate ending relationships. I hate breakups. Breakups suck. And so I find myself being very, very diligent on, okay, if I'm going to be in a relationship, this is going to be something that I learned from, that I grow from, something. I gotta, what did they say? I'm leaving here with something. But anyway, so stop just saying yes to anybody who asks. If you recognize that you are a catch, they should ask. That makes sense. If they can see the value that you have, which they should be able to, then they should ask you to be with them. But that doesn't mean you just say yes. And that's one of the things that I definitely realized has distinguished me from a lot of women, is my willingness to walk away from guys who don't fit my vision. And I'm not saying this is like something I'm great at, but I definitely have been honest with myself. There was a gentleman I dated, and he was really cool. We got along great. I, really enjoyed him, and we dated for several months. And we essentially had pretty much great investments in one another. Like, we'd invested time, we'd invested energy, all these things. And so it looked like it would have been a really good relationship. However, this gentleman was looking for a job, and I noticed that he was not looking for jobs in my city, because I guess you would consider it like we were doing somewhat distance, but it wasn't like super far. It was like some hours. And I just noticed he wasn't looking for jobs in my city. And so I had to be honest with him. I was like, well, what's your plan here? It's been like 3 months or so. Like, what are you thinking? And he was honest with me. He was like, well, I just don't see myself really working in that city. I'm really passionate about this field of work, and I don't think that opportunity would be in this city. And I said, okay, that's fair. But after knowing that, and this kind of goes with the boundaries one as well, after knowing that, do you know what I did? I stopped dating. I stopped being intimate with this person. I stopped, holding up all day long conversations. The phone calls every day kind of dwindled, because what are we doing here then? He's communicated, okay, this is where he communicated that if I was signing up for anything with him, it was going to be long distance. And so the question then became, am I comfortable with that? Can I uphold that? Is that something I can do? Which I didn't want to. And so I had to, go through that pain of, okay, maybe this isn't what I thought it was. And it was hard and it was sad. But at the same time, I had to make a decision for myself, and I had to do something because he made a decision, right? Like, and you have to recognize people make decisions based on where they see themselves and where they plan to see it with you. And you have to honor that and acknowledge that. And in that moment, I could have tried to just make it work, right? Because he did like me. And I feel like, had I wanted to just play along, then I probably could have. But was I going to be productive for me? Was I going to be fruitful? Was I going to be fruitful for me? And would that have been healthy? Would I always be trying out for him to finally move to the same city as me? Would I always be trying to convince him, oh yeah, this is now the time where you can, come to the same city as me? And I didn't see that as a productive and realistic way to really be in a relationship. So that's one of the biggest things, is that I had to really just honor myself and honor the fact that, okay, this isn't going to work in this capacity. Now, we could absolutely be friends still. I mean, he's a really cool guy, but I just know relationship wise, it wouldn't have worked out. And so that's hard. That's not easy. And I feel like I had a very practical way of thinking about it, because I did go through my self-love journey, and I did take the time to really ask myself those hard questions. Would I rather, sacrifice the comfort of a relationship in the same city? Would I rather sacrifice the comfort of having a relationship in the same city just to be in a relationship? Or do I think that I could find someone who would honor me and respect me and be there for me, but also be in the same city for me? And I think that's something that I can definitely find. And even if I can, I'm willing to wait on it, right? And so that's really big. And you want to know what's crazy? Short, like several months after, calling it quits with that gentleman, I ended up getting into a relationship, my longest relationship. And that is what I'm saying. I would have been blocking. I would have been holding on to a long distance relationship that I kind of sort of, was okay with, but not really, just for the fact that I wanted a relationship. When here I am, several months later in a relationship in the same city with a man who checked all the boxes for me. And that's what I'm saying is like, you block your blessing when you're just holding on to anything. And it's a display of, you doubting God's ability to deliver what you want for yourself and more. You have to trust that what you're asking for isn't too much. It's very realistic. And okay, sorry. That's another tangent. Sorry, y'all. Let's get to these self-reflective questions. How might practicing self-love guide my choices in selecting a partner? And so really think about that. When I loved myself more, I knew exactly what I deserved, and I knew what I was willing to put up with, what I was willing to tolerate, what I wasn't. It also made my dating, I feel, a lot less superficial. When I was operating from a space of lacking self-love and really trying to get my validation on, the different people who were in my life and what they looked like and what they had around them, it was really giving me more superficial outcomes. I had really pretty friends with really pretty things, and I had handsome suitors, but there was no substance there. The substance was lacking. The promise was lacking. The commitment was lacking. And it was very much so just superficial, like I said. And so it definitely changed the quality. I can't emphasize this enough. The quality of people that it attracted in my life. And so next question, what are some red flags that I've overlooked due to lacking self-love? And this is a big one. I think this is probably what I should have called this point, right? Like, you're willing to acknowledge red flags, and you're willing to address them and call them, what they are, a red flag, and then move accordingly. We aren't afraid to accept something as a red flag when you love yourself and you know your vision and you know where you're headed. You're willing to understand that, okay, this is going to hurt. I have to go through that heartbreak of, accepting that this relationship isn't what I thought it would be. This dating experience, with this person isn't going to go as far as I thought it would. And that's hard. That's not easy. But you can also rest assured that you did your best and you went into it in a healthy and positive way, and walk away from it knowing that you learned from that experience. Like, that is the best thing that could have happened to me, is like reshaping how I looked at dating, instead of like, oh, I'm dating for a relationship and I want it to end out in this and I want this to happen. And I just had to kind of look at it as, we are dating for the experience of getting to know someone and learning about other people and growing. And that is it. And you can look at red flags for what they are, and that is it. Like, and sometimes people give their red flags within a matter of conversation. And it's like, I don't even have to, talk about it with you. I don't have to go back and forth. You should address, like, if it's someone who's important to you, or if you have some rapport with this person, address a red flag. But like, if you are just meeting this person or whatever, it's like the first date is a big red flag that you're like, oh, this is like hardcore, not okay, then there's really no discussion necessary. Like, you kind of just like, yeah, we don't really match, and that's it. Like, like I said, I don't agree with ghosting, but I definitely don't think you have to like drag something out. Like, you can definitely just, oh yeah, like, we'd be better off as friends. Call it like good. Like, I don't think that's a problem. So, think about those red flags that you've let in your life because you didn't have that self-love. And that's hard, but that's so fruitful. So, okay. And then, in what ways might you prioritize your own well-being while navigating the early stages of dating? And so this is important too. I had to recognize that going on dates just to go on dates was not good for my time. It wasn't productive. And, especially like during COVID, it wasn't smart. Like, in some cases, like, I needed to sit down. And so just recognizing that if it's a situation where, you know, you need to take time for yourself. If you're burnout on dating, if you're feeling hopeless, if you feel like, you know, you aren't finding the quality of people that you want to find, that may be a great time to take a step back from dating. Mind what you need to work on. Because that is really what single season is for. Like, I cannot tell you, when I am single, I get in my wellness bag so much better. Like, and I feel like, you know, you think about relationship weight, like, it's just one of those things. I feel like when I'm single, I definitely prioritize my sleep, my wellness, my overall well being. I am happy. I enjoy myself, you know. And even as in a relationship, when I am healthy in my single season, it changes the quality of relationship I'm looking for, because I need to find a relationship that makes me feel that happy and more. And I find it, like, I cannot stress this enough. When I have a good single season, I go into a new relationship happy, whole, healthy, and I bring that to the relationship. And every relationship I've been in has evolved me and helped me grow into a more healthy version of myself, and it's produced healthier relationships every time. Like, my last relationship was healthier than the one before that. Like, I have healthier relationships because I'm willing to do the work during my single season to make sure I am not going into the next relationship, with the same brokenness that I had prior. And that is really what you need to use your single season for. If it doesn't mean just date and be sad that you don't have a date. It's like, no, like, acknowledge that. And I say this, you know, I've had periods of singleness for 6 years. I've had periods of singleness for 2 years. And I think, like, when I think about my relationships, I have never had a relationship within 1 year of the other. So I usually have like a nice amount of space in between them. And I haven't had that many relationships in my life. I feel like I've only had like 5 after high school, because I don't count high school as like relationships. That was when we just said yes to, you know, dances, and people were dropping us off at the movies. If I needed a ride from a parent to a date, it just doesn't feel like legit. But anyway, I definitely feel like that's just something that you should definitely consider, is like, how can you prioritize yourself and your own well-being? And even in the early stages of dating, don't cut out your friends. Don't do that. Stop it. Like, we're too old for that. Do not cut out your friends in dating. I've even told my own partners, like, hang out with your friends, because I'm gonna hang out with mine. Like, you need a social life outside of dating. You cannot just, I know it's hard, like, you want to spend all the time that you can with this person, but that's how people love bomb you. That's how people manipulate you. That's how people put on a front. And stop talking so much, and stop telling people what you're looking for in a date. Stop giving them the answers to the test, okay? Sometimes you just gotta watch and wait and see how people are. When men ask me, oh, what are you looking for? I'm looking for a promising partner who can support and uplift me, and I can do the same for him. That's it. That's all. And honestly, that's probably too much talking. Stop telling all the answers. I want this and I want that, and I want somebody who at least gets 6 figures, and I want somebody who drives this and does this. Stop. You're telling too much. You're talking too much. Sometimes you just gotta wait and see what people are able to produce. Because if you tell them the fruit you're looking for, you know what they can do? Go to the grocery store and buy the fruit. And say, look, see what I got? And then you be like, oh my gosh, what? No, that's not impressive. Like, so sometimes we just gotta wait and prioritize ourselves. And so, yeah, I feel like, number one, this episode is super long. I'm totally sorry. But I'm definitely going to do a part 2. And if you have any insight on, you know, your dating experiences or any input, I would love to hear about it. If you don't already follow me on social media, please follow me on Instagram at @square_of_self_love. And I also have a link tree in my Instagram bio where you can find my other listening platforms, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcaster, and YouTube. And follow me on TikTok. And then also, don't forget to answer the multiple choice question for this episode, which is, what aspect of self-love are you most excited to explore further in your dating journey? And so I cannot thank you guys enough for listening to this podcast. I hope it helps someone. I'm really excited about this episode, and we'll have part two available. But yeah, this episode was way too long, and I'm not about to torture nobody. So thank you all so much. And I hope this brings you love and happiness and all the good things. So until next time, friends. And of course, don't forget to love yourself.